And breaking the story down further is our guest, Eric Mandel, founder and director at Middle East Political Information Network and senior editor for security at the Jerusalem Report. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, President-elect Donald Trump's envoy heading to Doha, is he getting a head start a couple weeks before the administration changes?
Well, first of all, they seem to be in coordination. You have Brett McGurk from the Biden administration, a State Department security person who's longstanding, and they seem to be working in conjunction. This has been a very strange transition where the Trump team and President Trump himself have been meeting with foreign leaders. So it has been an odd transition, but they do seem to be on the same page here regarding the hostages.
And you said it yourself, it's a strange transition. Do we have an idea of how a transition like this actually takes place with such delicate negotiations?
Well, there's some very strong statements coming out of the president, and nobody wants to risk another hostage deal falling through. There are some parallels here. You think about when the feckless President Carter for 444 days had American hostages in Tehran. And when Ronald Reagan came in, the person who was more unpredictable and more willing seemingly to use force, that's when the American hostages were released. Here you have a situation where President Biden hasn't been able to, for over 400 days, obviously not being able to get the hostages out, including American hostages. And it looks like Donald Trump, especially with him saying, well, hell will break loose. The question here is we should not just focus on the hostages. This is a bigger issue. President Trump said yesterday, there should never have been an attack on October 7th. People forget that. And that is because the United States has turned a blind eye to Qatar. And if Qatar comes out of this smelling like a rose, as opposed to being a supporter of Hamas and really a problem. And if it goes to the next level, Qatar has been spending billions of dollars on American universities, undermining Israel and fostering anti-Semitism. Are we going to learn from this, or is this hostage deal, Qatar is going to come out of this looking good as a mediator, as opposed to a sanctuary and a funder of a U.S. designated terrorist organization?
And as you just mentioned, Trump did say that there will be all hell to pay if the hostages aren't returned by his inauguration. What do you make of such a statement?
I'm not really sure what that means. If it means that he will not restrain Israel, not restrain weapons supplies, and let Israel continue the military pressure, then that would be very good. As Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, said in a New York Times interview last week, that every time Hamas became resistant and moved away from a deal is when there was daylight between the United States and Israel. And if Trump realizes that and has his team be in lockstep with Israel, that is the best way to get the hostages back and ultimately has to get Prime Minister Netanyahu to finally agree to a day-after plan of what's going on to have Hamas not be a military or governing presence in Gaza.
All right, please stay with us. And now to an interesting development where the U.S. has redirected over $100 million in military aid from Egypt and Israel to Lebanon, with a focus on enhancing the Lebanese Armed Forces capabilities. According to the outgoing administration, this fund reallocation is intended to support Lebanon's border security, counterterrorism efforts, and its role in maintaining the Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire, as observed by U.S. Major General Jasper Jeffers.
The United States has announced the diversion of around $100 million of military aid intended for Egypt and Israel to Lebanon. $95 million from Egypt and $7.5 million from Israel are being reallocated to bolster Lebanese capabilities. According to the U.S. State Department, the funds will be made available to professionalize the Lebanese Armed Forces, strengthen border security, combat terrorism, and address security requirements affected by the shift in power in Syria. In the State Department notification to Congress of the planned shift, it calls the Lebanese Armed Forces a key partner in upholding the Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire, which is set to expire on January 26.
International and regional forces need to get Israel to respect the ceasefire deal and withdraw from Lebanon, and demand that Hezbollah hand over its weapons south of the Litani River. Lebanon should also discuss weapons north of the Litani River internally. These issues should be on the agenda of any future government or president, otherwise we will repeat the mistakes of the past.
The move comes after several Democrats expressed concerns over Egypt's human rights record, particularly the arrest of thousands of political prisoners, though the U.S. says it will continue to financially support Cairo. Meanwhile, the head of the Five Nations Oversight Committee monitoring the Lebanon ceasefire, U.S. Major General Jasper Jeffers, visited Lebanese Army headquarters in southern Lebanon to monitor Army deployment and check stockpiles of Hezbollah weapons set to be destroyed in the coming days.
The LAF is the legitimate security provider for Lebanon and continues to demonstrate to me and the rest of the mechanism it has the capability, intent, and leadership to secure and defend Lebanon. They have acted decisively, rapidly, and with clear expertise. Today, we saw an example of this with the soldiers of the 5th Brigade. The Engineer Corps in particular is full of true professionals, removing and rendering safe hundreds of pieces of unexploded ordnance every week.
The Lebanese army moved into the area after Israeli forces withdrew, as per the ceasefire agreement, to clear roads, remove munitions, and provide overall security in the region.
And still with me, our guest, Eric Mandel. Eric, is this a measure of good faith by the U.S. administration to help maintain the ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel?
Well, I think it's wishful thinking that the Lebanese Armed Forces, the LAF, is capable at this time or any time soon of truly doing what it needs to do according to United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701. Basically, what the Lebanese Armed Forces have done is they have gathered some weapons. They have unexploded ordinances they have dealt with. They have deployed, although not in the numbers that they will need to control South Lebanon. But it gets to the heart of this that is being ignored, that the Lebanese Armed Forces in the past has been complicit or coward by Hezbollah. Hezbollah has, if you look at the statements they made, they don't plan to go anywhere very soon. And Israel really, in accepting the 60-day ceasefire and promising if these things are done, withdraws from all of the territory and does not have some buffer zone, will those 80,000 Israeli citizens of the North come back and feel secure? As everybody really knows that the Lebanese Armed Forces, certainly at this time, is not capable of doing what it is. And I think this is, again, wishful thinking, and hope the Trump administration, when it comes in, has them speaking, at least privately, of what the true nature of the LAF is at this time. And there are many components within the LAF that do work with Hezbollah. And this doesn't even touch upon UNIFIL, which has been used by Hezbollah as places to hide weapons. So this is going to be, in the next 30 days when the ceasefire is over, a time of reckoning. And hopefully here the Trump administration stands with Israel and does not create daylight. As I mentioned before regarding Gaza, America and Israel need to be on the same page here regarding Lebanon. Hezbollah is down, Iran is down. Do not need any daylight here, and the Lebanese Armed Forces are the weakest link.
Right, a lot of questions still on that front. Eric Mandel, thank you very much for joining me.
My pleasure.